Welcome to the barn. I realize you guys haven't seen like an actual tour of this. I think we talked about how Ryan transformed this space into something for me. There's a chicken outside who wants inside. But then I don't think we ever got the official tour. Time for that later. We have more pressing issues now. If you're surprised to see my face, then that means you missed the last 1.5 videos. I say half because the last one was just sort of a surprising update of my dad unexpectedly passed away. I'm an only child, and I had to try and figure out how to take care of his end of life matters while preparing for somebody else's beginning of life matters, and it was very overwhelming. So if you didn't see the video before that, then you're surprised to hear me say I'm taking care of beginning of life matters. Let's take this in, shall we? Ready? How do you get up? Like this, I suppose. Here we are. Here we are, sunset in Camden. Anybody name that reference? This child inside of my being is measuring in the, that's how you sit back down, 97th percentile. My other babies were HG babies, meaning they had to suck the living nutrients out of my being because I wasn't able to keep anything in, and I lived off of yogurt and IV fluids. This baby, I've had no problems eating. You might be able to tell. I can tell a little bit in some different places. And that means this baby is going to be a chunk. I'm real nervous for how this is all going to play out, but I guess we'll all see together. So last week I gave an update saying that I had to set all of this down to try and figure some things out with my dad without going into that too much, because I've always kept, some of those family matters more private, because it's not just my business, it's somebody else's business as well. My dad and I had a fairly good relationship, although it wasn't a father-daughter relationship. We talked a few times a year, most of the years that I was growing up. As I grew up and got a better perspective on like the whole picture of why we had the atypical relationship that we did, I decided it was up to me to try and make effort to make sure he knew that I wanted him to be part of our picture. So I would do things like, send him cards and send him drawings and things that the kids did. And we had a fairly good relationship. Still only saw him a couple of times a year, and that was okay. I never felt like longing or anything for a father. My mom did a great job making me know that I was well loved. So as he went into retirement and he moved a couple of hours away from me near the ocean, I always wondered if he was lonely. I wondered if he had community. I wondered a lot of things because he was kind of a bit of a mystery to me. Well, a couple of days ago, after only confessing it to my mother-in-law and my midwife, we decided to drive out to his house at the ocean to try and tie up some final affairs that we really needed to do in person. I didn't tell the internet because I knew that I would be scolded for driving far away while this heavily pregnant. But I followed all best practices. We got out, I stretched my legs, made sure that I had good circulation and all that stuff. Ryan treated me like I was the most precious jewel. It was actually really nice in so many different ways being able to go there. I got to see my dad's world in an entirely different perspective, and all of this like wondering and, guilt and I don't know, just the weird emotions that I had where I filled in the blanks of the mysteries of his life instead were filled in with me knowing that he was part of a kayaking group, a hiking group. He had community. He was never alone. Everybody in his area knew him, and he was in a small town, and he was living out his dream. When I was little, he always told me that he wished he could live in a houseboat, surrounded by all natural woods and just like polished, raw edge, live wood things. And he was a super talented musician and skier and surfer, like really active when he was younger. So he just wanted to live on a houseboat and go be a part of nature all the time. He didn't have a houseboat, but the inside of his little beach house that he created was just him surrounded by things he loved. And it was actually really wonderful for me to be able to see how he and I are alike in some ways. I've never seen that before. I surround myself with things that I love in my tiny little space, pom-pom bedazzled mirrors and all. And he did the same thing with his live edge wood and beautifully bound books and all of his gorgeous instruments and things. So it was kind of this big wash of relief. Because of this unexpected turn of events, Ryan and I got to have 2 days away before baby comes. We'd go through everything we needed to in the day, end of the long day. He's exhausted, he's falling asleep on his feet, and yet he'd take me as far as I want to go to get the best food that I want to get, that all of the ocean has to provide. Every time he looked at me, there was a twinkle in his eye, and every single thing that we had to do, Ryan was the ultimate support for. Ryan had to do a lot of physical work while we were there, and I didn't. So I was hanging back and just making some of the phone calls and, trying to figure out our to-dos and best laid plans to get things that we had to get situated before baby situated. So Ryan's doing all of this physical labor. The end of the day comes, he crashes into the hotel bed. He's so exhausted, and my body is just feeling, you know, like the pains of end of pregnancy and all of this out of the ordinary stuff that we were doing because it wasn't part of our routine. And so I got in the tub to soak myself in my round ligaments, and I got stuck in the tub. So I had to wake him up from a dead sleep to have him help me get hoisted out of the hotel tub. And then he gave me a back rub. He went from dead asleep to like helping me, making sure I was comfortable. Anyways, I can't appreciate him enough. Who goes from being that tired after the longest day ever to being woken up, having to haul me out, and then just really making sure that I'm 100% completely relaxed and comfortable before he would go back to sleep again. Appreciate that guy. So in real life, I am really in between a whole lot of details between end of life, tying up loose ends, and beginning of life, tying up loose ends, and it is just a lot on my brain. But we're gonna set aside the end of life stuff now. I'm not gonna talk about that anymore. I have so much to tell you guys about what's going on in here that I literally don't know where to start. I could just ramble on forever and ever because I want you guys to get caught up with me so that we can move ahead together, where I'm not like trying to fill in the potholes that I missed before of this whole story, because this is freaking amazing. This pregnancy is stinking amazing. Okay, let's go through a really quick list. We have to start at the beginning. We just have to. And we only have a week before this baby's coming. So how am I supposed to get you all up to date by then? Listen fast. Before the pandemic hit, Ryan and I had a very, very hard discussion where we both said something that we had been thinking about, you know, in our own heads and kind of acknowledging just with the way life was going. But we had to have the real discussion of, is our family complete? Are we done? Now let's put these like imaginary buckets out, okay? This is the responsibility, do what's best with the hand you're given bucket. This is the Dreamland bucket, right? So Dreamland bucket, little bucket Marie, I don't know what I'm talking about. I was that girl who always knew I wanted to be a mom. Being an only child, and in the childhood that I had, I think my version of rebelling was wanting to have the biggest family possible when I was older. When we had to write reports about what we wanted to be when we grew up, I would always, you know, throw in my interests of famous artist or a brown cow so I could make chocolate milk or whatever my career aspirations were at the time. But I would always come back to, I know I want to be a mom of a big family. And I imagined I would marry into a big family and there'd be aunts and uncles and cousins and all these things that I wished that I had growing up. So there's that, right? I could picture myself with as much as 6, but I was hoping for a modest 4. So then I grow up, I meet Ryan. Ryan thinks he doesn't know if he ever wants to get married. He never pictured himself with kids. We meet, we fall in love, our story starts to shape. You guys know that we're both really strong in our faith. We put Christ at the center of everything we do. And as our family starts to shape, he starts to say things like, I want to have a ton of kids. He's like, I want to have my own baseball team. And that was a big change of heart from the guy who didn't even know if he wanted to get married. So I was right on board with that. We move along with our married lives. Now reality comes into play, right? One, we didn't even start our family until I was in my late 20s. So we got a late start there for being able to create this Field of Dreams sports team that we had set up in our minds. As life goes along and reality, you know, sets in, we realize, oh, okay, we need to take into account things like financial stability and the size of our house, the location of where we want to live, the school zones, like all that like grown-up responsible bucket stuff started to show up and appear. And so then in my mind, I thought, if we can have 3, that would be really good. I would be happy with 3. This is back when we were planning for Scarlett. I'm now thinking, I still want a big family. 3's on that cusp. I think I'll feel comfortable with 3. Fast forward, here they are, 3 little ducklings lined up in a row, and Sadie's turning about 2 years old, and Ryan and I haven't had the official conversation about whether we're done or not. But as I look at that responsibility bucket, there's a lot in it. I've had a lot of health stuff come up in the end of 2019 that really felt like a nail in the coffin for that whole responsibility bucket side. I'll get into that a little bit more because there are some big things that you should know. So I think it was around October of 2019 when it just sort of poured out of me, because I think I needed the therapy of mourning the loss of the dream team family, just having a million children running around in my farmland of dreams that I've always wanted, and like all of that kind of stuff that we were going to have some version of that picture. It might be a tiny little house, 3 kids and some chickens and bunnies. Like, we're still going to make our dream. It just might not be this thing that I had built up my entire life. So I needed to have the conversation with my husband. We found ourselves one evening after several friends of mine had just announced that they were having babies. Between Heidi, Brittany, Christy, those are just the YouTube-y friends. I had a bunch of other friends that aren't on YouTube that were all announcing pregnancies. It just sort of spilled out with Ryan and I that we needed to like confront it and have the real conversation. So one of the big nails in the coffin of my happy bucket, let's take a moment to just appreciate the fact that that makes sense. I had a whole lot of problems arise all at once. If you've been with me for a long time, you know that I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis back in the day, which is an autoimmune disorder where scar tissue forms just unexpectedly, and it can be really dangerous. Like if you have scar tissue forming on your lungs and on vital organs, it can be a really big deal, or it can kind of be a non-issue. And for the most part, it's been a non-issue for me. So I started going to see all of these doctors to find out if what I was experiencing, because I had all kinds of digestive problems. I developed a cough that just would not go away. It didn't go anywhere, and this is before COVID. It was just this cough that was persistent every night and every morning. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night coughing, super dry. I sounded like a 102-year-old smoker. I wondered if I had like secondary COPD because I grew up with people who smoked. It was a whole thing. The doctor thought it was serious enough that she ordered me like a full workup. I had an ultrasound on my thyroid. I had an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, all of the cameras going all the directions at the same time, meeting in the middle. And after, I don't know, 20 different doctor's appointments and specialists and all these different people that I've seen, I walked away with several diagnoses. One, which has been debunked, but I had to think I had this for like a year, tuberculosis. People don't really get tuberculosis that I know of that much in this day and age. The last I had heard of it was Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge, and that's what she died of. So when I heard tuberculosis, I was like, huh? Like I remember seeing tuberculosis hospitals, like a picture of a tuberculosis hospital where they would put those people, and the nurses and doctors would all wear those big gas masks with the things, and like they kind of look like an elephant, and that's all I knew about tuberculosis. So that was laid on me. Somewhere in the mix, I also had a positive test for whooping cough as well. Then as we went further down the line, I found out that sarcoidosis, if you have a flare-up, such glamorous name, sarcoid. I could be having a sarcoidosis flare-up, and that would create a positive test from tuberculosis. So there's all this stuff. They also found a spot on my thyroid that had extra calcification that they wanted to look after. And the colonoscopy had the biggest shock to me. When I went to my follow-up appointment to see the results with the doctor, he literally walked in the door by opening the door and going, "When I say you are the luckiest person," that was the first thing he said to me. And I was just like, what? Sorry, what? And he was like, "You are so lucky." It was a big deal for someone in their 30s to get a colonoscopy. They usually don't recommend till you get them till you're 50. And it was kind of like a last resort because there was just so much going on with me. And I had seen so many doctors that they agreed to let, 30-something-year-old me go get a colonoscopy. I keep doing this every time I say colonoscopy. I wonder what the sign is for colonoscopy in sign language. They're usually quite visually graphic. He said, if you had waited until the normal timeline for a woman in your age to get a colonoscopy, you wouldn't have made it. You would have been dead. And I said, hello, what, sir? Please explain. Turns out I had a gigantic, he made a good point of saying there was a gigantic polyp in my colon, and it was causing a whole lot of problems. And it was something that would in the future turn into inoperable fatal cancer. Now, he didn't call it precancerous. I don't know exactly the terminology of why, but he just kept saying, "You are so lucky, you are so lucky." They got it all out, and he said, "I want to see you in 6 months for another colonoscopy," which usually after you have a colonoscopy, they want to see you in 5 years if you're healthy. So 6 months is a big deal. Okay, so now we're going to set that health stuff down. You kind of got the, what I was dealing with. This is all while I'm working in that other job. Ryan was working 3 different jobs. There was a lot going on in life, and I wasn't finding the time to make a YouTube video. My mortality was staring me in the face. Jump back into that one night. I've got friends left and right having babies. I'm being told I have giant life-threatening polyps in my colon and possibly a sarcoid flare-up and possibly tuberculosis. And I'm just picturing Moulin Rouge and she coughs into the handkerchief. There was a lot going on. There is a fly in here that's driving me nuts. Is it driving you nuts? Just know that I'm aware. I'm pretending I don't see him, as if that's going to help somehow. So now Ryan and I find ourselves on the couch. We're having a conversation and we say the thing that breaks my heart. We're done with babies. Focusing on my health is going to be its whole own thing, and we need to make sure we're being really responsible. in the fertility land so that we can focus on getting me healthy and getting all this stuff checked out, those follow-up endoscopies and colonoscopies and is it a sarcoid flare-up and all of the like doubling down on the tuberculosis tests and all of that stuff. All of that stuff doesn't even dip into my first reason why I thought we probably shouldn't have any more children, which is HG, hyperemesis gravidarum, if you want to look it up. But it's where your body never accepts the pregnancy as a baby, and the entire time you're pregnant, it's trying to purge you of what it basically perceives as a parasite. So with all 3 other kids, I always like to say that I was a human incubator, because if you just picture what an incubator is, it lays still, it doesn't do anything except for keep the life inside of it alive. That was me with all 3 other children. HG is known to get worse with each subsequent pregnancy, and it can be life-threatening. It can affect somebody's kidneys, their potassium levels, a whole bunch of things. It was its whole own experience, and knowing that it got worse each time, it made it feel really irresponsible to get pregnant again. Nails, 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 hammer, hammer, hammer. The bucket's no fun, and it's full and like locked in solid. It feels like it's dead in the water. You're done having children, Marie. So Ryan and I finally have a conversation about that. And even though it's something that like left unsaid, we both sort of knew, once we had to say it, like it was really hard for me. Did a lot of crying. Setting that chapter down to move on to the next was hard for me. I know not everybody's going to understand that, but just understand that it was hard for me. Started to make a plan on how to wrap up that chapter of our lives so that we could move on, focusing on making sure I was healthy for the 3 wonderful children that we did have. Then, boom, 2020 hits. All of the 2020 things before COVID even hit, where it was just like a crap year, the wave washed over so strong. I wish I could tell you guys everything that we went through, but it just feels crass to just like drop those bombs. I can say in January, I lost a good friend, and she was murdered. That's the magnitude of how 2020 began. So then COVID and coronavirus comes up, and I start to feel like, okay, I'm glad we're being really responsible and that we're not planning on having any other children, because I can't imagine what that's going to be like. These women who are going to go through a pandemic being pregnant, and what's that going to be like? How are they going to be in the hospitals? How do you bring a new child into this world back when, you know, Corona was brand new and so big and scary? Like, it just felt like, yes, okay, here's another way that I need to breathe through that decision. So now you're going to have to just take all of that, and we're going to go to where I find out that I am pregnant and how insanely shocked I was. When COVID hit, kids get pulled out of school. We realize it's not just going to be 2 weeks. Schools are shut down from now until what felt like eternity. I came together with one of my sister wife friends. No, I'm not a polygamist. If you're new, just take it as like close friends, community, village kind of thing. And we decide that we're going to pod our families together, and we're going to try and keep like a school format for our children for the whole following year. We had actual like, you know, calendar time in the morning and journaling time. And we go into this room to do like our morning report and the calendar and the weather. Then we go into this room and we sit down and do our journaling and literacy and math and geography and PE. Ryan would take kids outside. We had the big parachute like you have in school. We were keeping a really structured format. So we finish out our school year and we start planning this very structured school to go into fall of 2020 school year with our little pod. Along the way as we're doing all this, I keep acknowledging how good this is that we're done with growing our family, because I couldn't teach a homeschool pod of these children if I had HG. There was no way. I'm so glad that my kids won't see me that sick again as they are older, and they're going to probably remember it more, because it was really traumatic for Scarlett. Like, I remember when I was pregnant with Sadie, at one point she actually asked Ryan if I was going to die. So dramatic, but like, I didn't want her to ever experience that again. And now that Luca and Sadie were older, I didn't want it to affect them at all. So these like thoughts are running through my brain. I'm thinking, yes, good thing I'm not pregnant because I have this job now. Good thing I'm not pregnant because we're going to be teaching a homeschool co-op. Good thing I'm not pregnant because COVID-19 is now here and looks like it's here to stay. One of the health things that I can tell you is that for my entire life since I first started having my cycle, it's always been exactly 28 days. It's always been the exact same duration. I've never had an issue with that. And 2 months before I got pregnant, it went haywire. So that was one of the reasons why I thought something's really wrong. Now, you know, they found something with my thyroid and all this other stuff is a mess, and now my cycle's getting messed up too, and it had never been messed up before. You'll hear me talk more about that in Kat and Christy's video. I think you'll be able to piece things together at that point, but I just really wanted you to know all this backstory because you needed to know how much my head was wrapped up in like health issues and you know, COVID-19 and homeschool pod, and I have to be working and I have to be upright, and the HG stuff, like all of that was just like swarming in my brain. Okay, I feel like you guys need like a break, an intermission, or a reward treat of some sort for sticking through all of that, because we're fairly caught up together now. We're to the point where I can tell you about me finding out that I was pregnant. I'll show you the actual footage of me finding out. The quickest version I can do this story is school starts, Ryan and I get into the flow of teaching. He takes it super seriously. He's so cute. Every Monday he would wear like a full on like dress shirt and tie. We would call him Principal Rye. He would always say that he wanted to start his Monday on best foot forward for school, and it was really fun. Teaching with him all year was really, really fun. So one day I wake up and I just don't feel good. My cycle's been off for a couple of months and I don't feel right. And I've had cramping for a few days and I'm thinking something is really wrong with me. I need to get myself back into the doctor. I just feel awful and my clothes felt awful. And I thought it must have been because we were having horrible smoke outside from the Canada and California fires. And I felt like I couldn't get a full breath of fresh air. So I just felt like claustrophobic in my own body and there was nowhere to go. I changed my clothes a couple of times because my clothes just felt weird. And I went and told Ryan, I don't know how well I'm going to teach today. I just feel really, really off. And I'm getting scared. I want to call the doctor and make another follow-up appointment. And he was like, okay, well, you know, we need some stuff from the dollar store for a project we were doing for the kids. We needed like little rewards and prizes. And he's like, why don't you go do that and just take your time and I'll, you know, do morning lessons. So I did. So while I was driving there, I'm thinking about all of my symptoms and everything. And I even thought, the doctors are going to ask me if there's a possibility I'm pregnant. My body's bloated, I'm cramping, I'm having all these issues with my cycle. They're going to think that maybe, you know, something had happened and maybe I was pregnant for the past couple of months. And when they asked that question, is there any chance you can be pregnant? I didn't want to go through the rigmarole. So while I was at the dollar store, I thought I'll just grab a couple of the dollar store tests so I can say, no, I just took, you know, some pregnancy tests yesterday. I'm not pregnant. Get to the dollar store. I go collect all the stuff for the kids first. And then I'm like, oh yeah, the pregnancy test almost slipped my mind. I go back and I go to grab it. And as soon as my hand hits the stinking pregnancy test, I think, oh my gosh, I think I'm pregnant. And I start thinking back into like the timeline of things. And I'm like, no, there's no way, Marie. There is absolutely no way. There's no way. And in my mind, there's one side of me that's just going, you're pregnant. You're pregnant. That's why you feel bloated. That's why you feel this. And the other side of me is trying to be logical. And I'm like, there's no, I am not. Like, what kind of weird heart game is this? No, you are not. So I'm still holding the pregnancy test in my hand. I grabbed a couple of them and I like dropped them in the basket, like trying to get the thought out of my head because there was something in me going, I think I'm pregnant. So I started doing this in the store. Like, I'm walking around the store trying to grab the rest of the stuff. My brain is now spinning. I can't focus on anything else. I've got these weird, like, conflicting thoughts in my head of one being like, you are pregnant. And the other part of me is going, shut the F up. Shut the F up. And I just kept doing that with my hand. So I've got my little basket and I'm going, just trying to calm myself down because this voice in my head of, oh my gosh, these are pregnancy symptoms is just getting louder and louder. So I have to drive what feels like a million miles from the dollar store back to our house. Ryan's in the middle of teaching. I set the bag down. I go straight into the bathroom with these pregnancy tests. I did set up my phone for that just in case moment. And I needed you to know all of this because you needed to know what was going on in my head and what was going on outside of the house. Because you stuck through all of this, I'm going to give you 2 rewards now of being able to see not only me finding out, but also me telling Ryan. I have to say the sound quality is going to be really awful because, like I said, the air quality was so bad in our area that they actually told everybody to keep their doors and windows shut. We were supposed to create like barriers so that the outdoor air couldn't come in. Everybody had air purifiers on and the news was just filled with how to create your own air purifier. This is in the middle of the pandemic and everything. The world just felt like a real rough place, which is why I thought I was just having a hard time and feeling claustrophobic with it all. So in the videos, there are massive fans going and you can't hear that much. The me finding out video, I also had a fan going because I didn't want Ryan to hear any weird little noises that escaped my body as I was taking these tests and trying to figure out what was going on. Then I had to wait through the whole school day, longest school day of my life, before I told Ryan, after you see me find out, come back here to the barn and I'll explain what you're about to see with Ryan finding out. You'll note you'll know what's going on in my mind there. You'll see me actually freaking out. At some points, you'll see me praying to the Lord above because I'm praying for 1, how am I going to live with HG and this pregnancy? 2, my health and everything that's going on. I can't have a colonoscopy now in 6 months while I'm pregnant. Can I? I don't think I can. just all of the stuff that I've just told you was like overwhelming me in these different places, and also just trying to figure out how this happened. It felt a bit divine intervention-y. And so I had some questions for the man above. So now watch me go through all of that, and all the nonverbal stuff you're about to see is going to make a whole lot more sense because of everything you just had to sit through. I thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening to all that. It feels good to get it out. Now we can move along a little bit more on the yellow brick road together. And then the next video will be me telling some of my friends. Then the video after that will be us finding out what the sex is. See, it's a good time. There's a good string of things coming. Okay, go watch me find out and all the facial expressions and stuff that I apologize for. Spend the rest of that school day absolutely reeling in my brain and having some serious discussions with the Lord above about how this must be his child and he's got some grand plan. I am amidst thank yous and terrified and all kinds of things just going on in my brain. Didn't tell Ryan, just had to make it through the school day. And I started thinking about, well, how do I tell him? I'm not going to do some big surprise thing because this was a shock. I just needed him to know as fast as possible. So as soon as the other family's kids walked out the door, we got our kids situated somewhere else. I just went into the kitchen. Once again, we had our air purifiers and big box fans and all kinds of things going, so it's super loud. Ryan walks into the kitchen and I just chuck the pregnancy test at him. He catches it and you'll kind of be able to make out that he's like, huh, where'd you find this? Because he thinks it's an old one. He thinks that I'm just throwing like 5-year-old pregnancy tests at him. And I just didn't say anything. I think I just sat there like a little weirdo with all my chins. And then he keeps walking towards me and he's like, so where was this? And I don't say anything. And he goes, this is old, right? Or something like that. I still don't say anything. And he goes, you didn't just take this, did you? I'm pretty sure it was something like that. And I think I just do a goofy nod. And he's like, what? Being a man, he stayed more composed than I did. He wasn't melting on the floor or crying to the Lord above like I did. He did a little bit in the days to come, but in that moment, he just was shocked, had some questions, some of the same ones I had that we both couldn't answer, and held on to me. So here you go, there's that. Hey Ryan, come here for a second. What's happening?
Did you just take that?
Yes. We're going to talk to Daddy for a minute. Seriously, how?
That's what I feel like. Oh.
And now we can close that chapter. I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions about like, well, what about all your health stuff? And now you're pregnant and all of that. Let's just wrap some of it up really quickly. I might be having a sarcoid flare up. It might be causing the cough. Maybe it could be pulmonary. I did go see a pulmonologist, but there's a lot they can't do while you're pregnant, and they just decided to wait until I was done. For the most part, my health has been pretty exceptional. I'm still coughing, but I did have subsequent tuberculosis tests that came back negative after the biggest rigmarole, you guys. Like, they were talking about possibly having me deliver in a COVID wing because they wanted to have vacuum air so that I wasn't as risk to the health of the like medical staff. Like, someone said that somewhere along the way. It was some high risk doctor that wasn't my actual doctor who really freaked me out. And in the end, my midwives were like, no, it's not that big of a deal. There actually are pregnant women with tuberculosis out there, and they have procedures in place that they know how to handle that. But it did mean that I could be having a sarcoidosis flare up, and it would show up as a positive tuberculosis test. That could be very serious, and it's something that as soon as the baby's born, I'm going to go in for more extensive testing and x-rays and all the other things. We're getting baby here safely, and then I'll step back into all that stuff again. I'm feeling very optimistic about it all. I wasn't before all of this, but the fact that I got pregnant with this dream baby that I really seriously thought I was never going to be able to have, and I didn't have HG, feels like God, like I've said this so many times already, but God is doing something. God is now writing this story. We're in the back seat. I even think the timing of like my dad passing with this baby coming is a part of this story. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to record all this, because as it unfolds, I literally have no idea what's coming. And I just wanted to document it. So someday when this whole thing like wraps up, I'll be able to look back and we can see the story together, because so many changes are happening, and we really feel like so much of it, if not all of it, is out of our hands. That is the end of this video. I'm so glad you guys are caught up. Did you really listen to all of it? It was so many words. If you really did listen to all of it, tell me below. I want to give you kudos and pats on the back and all of that stuff. Next video coming up will be me telling some friends. That was a good time too, because the shock that everybody has about this pregnancy, It goes way beyond just me and Ryan. In fact, we're all still shocked about it. Just in this past week on Marco Polo, I've had 3 or 4 friends all make comments about how they can't believe I'm pregnant. And the baby's due in less than 10 days. If we look at it, can we get used to it? Somehow all of this is going to make its way out. And seeing as how it's not an HG baby, they're expecting somebody very large. So pray for me. I'm nervous. If you have questions, which I'm sure you do, this was a lot, write them below. I'll try and include them in the next video. We'll just keep this conversation rolling right along, okay? Bye. After we get out of the baby chapters, we'll come see more of this fun space later. Right now, it's going to be all about this.